Dear comrades, I want to thank the Minister for a detailed analysis of the situation in the armed forces and on the line of combat contact. And, as is customary, I will simply share with you some thoughts of a general nature. Probably nothing particularly new to say. Nevertheless, I believe this is important. I would like to begin with our recent history, with what was happening, in order to understand where we are and why we are where we are. Immediately after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and back then, it seemed to us that we would very quickly become members of the so-called civilized family of European peoples, the civilized Western family. Today, it turns out that there is no civilization there at all. There is only complete degradation. But never mind. Back then, it seemed that this was good. And so, we would become precisely a full-fledged, equal part of this family. Nothing of the sort happened. You understand what the issue is? Nothing of the sort. We did not become any equal part of this family. No, on the contrary, Russia continued to be pressured from all sides, and moreover, more and more strongly. Practically everything was decided in relation to Russia from a position of force. They patted us on the shoulder, invited us to various events, but the West pushed through its interests in the Russian direction precisely by forceful means, including armed means. What about support for separatism and terrorism? It was precisely demonstrated and carried out by armed means. Terrorists were supplied with weapons, money. They were provided with political and informational support across the board. They imposed economic restrictions. This is also forceful pressure. And what pressure? I remember very well, personally, when we said that we must protect our country from terrorism, and we were told that, no, you do what you want. But this is not allowed. That is not allowed. This is not permitted. Otherwise, you will not get any loans. Otherwise, you will not get an extension of preferential regimes. This is also direct forceful pressure and restrictions in the economic sphere. Destructive instruments of influence on Russia's internal politics were used, destabilizing Russia from within. Simply purposefully, just as we see in some other countries, instruments were created and used to destabilize the internal political situation. Ultimately, yes, and of course, nothing that had been created in the post-war period was working anymore. Everything began to degrade very quickly. All these rules and the UN Charter began to be ignored. Well, the events in Yugoslavia, what is this? Where is the UN Charter there? The use of force. We have talked about this many times, but this is a fact. Where is it? There is nothing. They simply did what they considered necessary. Did they manage to break through, force a vote? Good. But if they didn't succeed, they didn't care. Direct use of armed forces. And in the end, they tore apart Yugoslavia and the Serbs, tore them apart into different state apartments, ripped apart one people. And that's it. That's all. And ultimately, I'm not even talking now about NATO expansion, although this is an obvious thing. Even today, they tell us, you have no right to force anyone to resolve their security issues the way you want, and deprive them of the right to do it the way they want. We are not depriving anyone of any right, and we are not demanding anything special from anyone. We simply insist on the fulfillment of promises given to us. It was publicly stated that there would be no NATO expansion to the east, but they didn't care. Simply one wave of expansion after another. We are not demanding anything special. I repeat once again, we insist on the fulfillment of promises given to us. I think it is clear to everyone in this hall that it was one thing to have agreements with the Soviet Union and another thing with modern Russia when the Soviet Union collapsed. They simply completely ignored all our interests. The matter ultimately came to a coup d'etat in Ukraine. What democracy is there, which they poured into our ears for decades? Simply an armed coup. Well, they should have gone to elections, as I've said 100 times before. They would have won the elections. Nothing was stopping them. They would have won for sure. No, they simply showed force, and that's all. And then they began to suppress the southeast, the southeastern regions by force, practically unleashed a war. We did not start the war in 2022. It was the destructive forces in Ukraine with the support of the West. In essence, the West itself unleashed this war. We are only trying to end it, to stop it. Moreover, at first we tried, by these peaceful means, negotiations in Minsk, as you remember, and then we were forced to include the military component because we understood that we were being deceived. And this deception was exposed. Without any embarrassment, it was publicly stated by top officials that they had no intention of implementing anything. They simply took a pause in order to equip the armed forces of Ukraine with weapons and equipment. They brought it to a coup d'etat, consciously started combat operations there. I am sure, consciously brought it to war. President Trump says that if he had been president then, nothing like this would have happened. It's possible that's true, because the previous administration consciously led the matter to armed conflict. And I think it's clear why. Everyone believed that in a short period of time, they would destroy Russia, break it apart. And the European hangers-on immediately joined in this work of the previous American administration in the hope of profiting from the collapse of our country, to reclaim something that was lost in previous historical periods, and to try to take revenge. As has now become obvious to everyone, all these attempts and all these destructive plans against Russia have completely failed. Completely. Russia has demonstrated its resilience in the economy, in finance, in the internal political position of society and the state of society. And finally, in the sphere of defense capability. Yes, we still have many issues and problems in this sphere. I see people in this hall who came here directly from the front lines, from the line of combat contact. Here they sit, I see them, and they know that there are still very many problems in the army. They face this every day. And yet, our armed forces have become completely different. Completely different. And the main thing that has happened during the special military operation is that Russia has regained its status of full sovereignty. Russia has become, in every sense of the word, a sovereign country. We have regained this status, including in large part with your participation, with the participation of the armed forces. Our army has become completely different, and this concerns troop command, tactics, strategy. This concerns equipment. This concerns the activities and work of the defense industrial complex. This concerns the strategic component. Our nuclear shield is more modern than the nuclear component of any official nuclear power. How modern is it there? Over 80%? 92%? 92%. The modernity of our nuclear forces. There is nothing like this in any nuclear country in the world. We have new strike weapons appearing, new armaments. No one in the world has this, and it won't appear soon. I mentioned we know this. Avangard, Burevestnik, and so on. And the ground forces are growing strong. Yes, I repeat once again, the guys came from the front. They know there are many problems. But the troops are completely different, and they are battle-tested. There is no other army like this in the world. It simply does not exist. Yes, the armed forces of Ukraine are going through the crucible of military action. But unfortunately for them, just as Ukrainian statehood is falling apart. This is evident from the golden toilets. The armed forces are also degrading. This is evidenced by the increasing number of deserters. Over 100,000 criminal cases for desertion alone have been opened in Ukraine, and the number of deserters is calculated in hundreds of thousands in total. This is a sure sign of degradation. Our armed forces are on the rise. I repeat again, much needs to be done. But all this will be done. And despite this, we have always said, and now I want to say this, we, as before, are ready to conduct negotiations and are ready to resolve all the problems that have arisen in recent years by peaceful means. The administration of the United States of America is demonstrating such readiness, and we are conducting a dialogue with them. I hope the same will happen with Europe. It is unlikely that this is possible with the current political elites. But in any case, this will be inevitable as we continue to strengthen. If not with current politicians, then when political elites change in Europe. I want to thank you for your combat work in 2025 and express confidence and hope and confidence that all tasks facing the country will be solved. Thank you very much.